Hello and good morning. Hope everybody can hear me. Okay, I have 10:59. We'll get started right at 11. I want to make sure everybody who wants to join our session this morning has the ability to do so. So give us just a minute and we will get rolling talking about interventions for struggling readers. Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I hope everybody can hear me okay. My name is Susan McCowan, and if you are here to talk a little bit and learn a little bit more about interventions for struggling readers, then you are in the right breakout session this morning. You're in the right spot. So I hope that everybody can hear me okay and see my first slide up on the screen. And again, if you are here for interventions for struggling readers, this is the breakout session for you. Okay, so this morning we are going to jump in and dive into talking about more specifically than just MTSS overall. We're going to focus in on our struggling readers and how to best support them in the classroom. In particular, we're going to talk about strategies to enhance memory, which is one of the biggest gifts you can give to your students, is to help them find ways to remember the information that you are sharing with them to help build those reading skills, improve reading fluency, and just overall have better memory and short-term storage for better reading comprehension. So that's what our topic is going to be this morning. My name is Susan McCowan, and I am a reading and dyslexia specialist. And welcome to my slideshow, my presentation this morning. Glad that y'all are here. Hopefully you're enjoying. I really enjoyed our keynote speaker this morning. Really had some good insights and came away with some good information. So I was happy to be a part of that this morning. And I hope you're enjoying your summer and spending a little time with us today here at the MTSS conference. And glad you're here. You should be able to see on the screen my contact information. Again, my name is Susan McCowan. I work here in Huntsville at the Service Center, Region 6. I am a reading and dyslexia specialist. So I do all things dyslexia and related disorders, dysgraphia, any kind of learning difficulties that are, especially those associated with reading. I am an educational diagnostician and have the benefit of working for many years in the special education department, and as well as 504 as a 504 coordinator. And so was very fortunate to have the opportunity to do a lot of dyslexia evaluations, work with special education staff and students who have learning difficulties, especially with those kiddos with reading problems, and was able to really dip deep in those waters, dive deep into 504 services and special education services for our students. And so I hope I can share with you a little bit about what I learned over the years working with those populations, working in special education and 504, and as well as learning different multisensory reading intervention programs. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Again, you can see my contact information there on the screen. I would ask y'all to do me a favor. If you are interested in having a copy of the slides, the presentation slides this morning, what I'm going to be sharing with you, if you take down the information that you have, either my phone number here in Huntsville to my desk, you have it there on the screen, or you can always email me at smccown@esc6.net. Feel free to send me an email, and if you'd like the presentation slides, I'll be more than happy to share those with you. If you'd like to have me include you on my list of contacts so that you get any information that I share, I would love to have your name added to that list as well. So if you are interested in either of those things or both, then please send me an email and I will share the presentation slides and get you added to my list of contacts. All right, let's dive in a little deeper again. I'll try to share my information again before the session is over for anybody who comes in late, or if you just didn't get a chance to take the information down. So hopefully you can see right now the next presentation slide that I want to share with you. And we ask ourselves this question as classroom teachers, no matter what subject area or content area that you are teaching in or that's your focus, is how do we teach our struggling readers? How do we help support them in the classroom? Every classroom has at least one, if not multiple kiddos who are struggling with their reading skills, struggling to read at grade level. And we put a lot of demands on those kiddos when it comes to the classroom. And it doesn't matter what content area or what subject area you teach. Obviously the social studies teacher, the language arts teacher has to focus a lot on reading skills. But even if you are the band teacher or the PE teacher, the specialist teacher, music, your kiddos have to be at some point able to read information and to read with fluency and good comprehension. That's always our goal as teachers. I can remember when I started teaching many moons ago, and one of the first things I remember from starting my classes was one of our professors saying, every teacher is a teacher of reading. And I think that still holds up. Doesn't matter what content area, we all have struggling readers that are in our classrooms, and we all have to think of ways to support them, no matter what area is our focus. And so when we are thinking of how to best support our students, first thing we want to do is identify the problems, what's going on with these kiddos that is making it difficult for them to read and comprehend the information that they need to know. We'll talk about phonological awareness here in just a minute, and I'll help you to identify what the problem is from a reading and a specialist and a diagnostician's point of view. And from there, we'll talk more about effective interventions, what things we can do in the classroom to help our kiddos with reading to best support them. Also, progress monitoring. We've all been, if you've been in this any length of time teaching, you know well that progress monitoring is something that really is helpful for us as teachers in order to best meet the needs of our kiddos. Reviewing the data, we'll talk a little bit about that. We're great at collecting data. Sometimes I don't think we give ourselves enough time to really review that information and then revise, change our instruction as needed based on what the data tells us. So that's what I hope to walk through with you today, starting with looking at what is the problem when we have kiddos who are struggling to learn how to read. So let me share my next slide with you, and we'll try to focus in on what's going on with our kiddos. So you should be able to see a slide that says phonological awareness. And that's a term that usually the lower grade teachers are pretty familiar with, but I'll walk through it with you so everybody has a clear understanding of what phonological awareness is and why it's so important in learning how to read. There are two main skills that are cognitive processes in our brains that we need to have well developed in order to learn how to read with fluency, to learn how to read with good comprehension. And those two main skills or cognitive processes are phonological awareness. It's related to the auditory process, and phonological memory. So let's talk about phonological awareness first. When we speak, we use what are little sounds in speech. They're called phonemes. And those little speech sounds, we put them together to form words, to communicate. Obviously, we communicate orally through language, but also we do so in a written format. This is what we know as reading and decoding. So the phonemes in our speech are central to learning how to read and read with good fluency and comprehension. So for example, let me see if I can clarify this a little bit. If we have a word like cat, cat has 3 phonemes in it, 3 speech sounds, k, a, t. And when I put those 3 speech sounds together, I have the word cat. I could have another word like shop. Shop has 4 letters, but it only has 3 phonemes, 3 separate sounds, sh, a, p. And you put those 3 sounds together and they make the word shop. And the part of our brains, our cognitive functioning that we use to put those sounds together, to detect them and to understand those sounds, to interpret them, is what we call our auditory processing. It has everything to do with hearing. Now, that doesn't mean that kiddos who have trouble with reading have bad hearing. It's not the actual ability of the ear to hear something. Obviously, you would want that to be working well, functioning well, but it's the brain's way of interpreting information that comes in through our ears. That's auditory processing. So of course, we all hope that our hearing is in good shape, but we also want, if we're going to be good readers, we want our brains to interpret that information that comes in through our ears, those little phonemes in our speech. We want our brain to interpret those clearly and to do so efficiently and with automaticity. So the cognitive processing of those phonemes, when there is a problem there in our brains, in our cognitive functioning, that's where reading problems come from. For 90% of readers, it's a problem in your phonological awareness, in your auditory processing of those little phonemes, those speech sounds. Now, from time to time, you will have kiddos that are having trouble with reading, with decoding words, with building reading fluency, and it's possible that there may be something else going on that's not in their auditory processing, but that's usually not the case. Most of the kiddos, I would say as much as 90% of the kiddos that we come across in our classrooms who are struggling to read on grade level, it's a problem in their phonological awareness. So to give you another example of that, so hopefully everybody understands kind of what your phonological awareness and your auditory processing skill, what that does for you, is think about the word intervention. Intervention, you've got it up there on the screen for you. Take a second, I'll give you just a few seconds to think about how many sounds, how many phonemes are in the word intervention. Well, if you're looking at the screen, I know you can see there are 12 letters, 12 graphemes, 12 letters in the word intervention, but there are only 10 sounds, 10 phonemes in that word. If you break them down, the word intervention, I, N, T, V, F, N, Sh, N. So those are the individual phonemes in the word intervention. So if you could hear all those little sounds in the word intervention, and with, that wasn't too difficult, then your phonological awareness is probably intact and you're doing pretty good. So yay for us, give us a pat on the back. So that's phonological awareness, but also we want what's called our phonological memory to be intact as well. This is another part of our cognitive function and our cognitive process that needs to be in good shape if we are going to be able to read with good fluency, to have good comprehension. So our phonological memory is the ability to hold information, things like numbers or sounds, phonemes, words, in our working memory, our short-term memory, in that temporary storage. And we have to do this to hold that information in our short-term working memory long enough to process it, to use it, and then transfer it on back to our long-term memory. That's an absolutely essential skill for learning how to read. So phonological memory, along with overall phonological awareness, are core skills for us as we learn to read, especially to read with good fluency, because good fluency means good comprehension. Usually, we'll talk more about that in a little while. So phonological memory, let's think a little bit more about phonological memory. Okay, what does that look like day to day? Let's break it down a little bit further. So for example, your memory for digits. This is one test we often give to kiddos when we're trying to figure out if their phonological memory is intact. So I'm going to say 3 numbers to you. I'm going to give you 3 numbers. I'll let you think about them for a few seconds, and then I'm going to have you manipulate that information. So get your ears ready. So your 3 numbers are 7, 4, 2. 7, 4, 2. Think about those for just a second. Now I want you, without writing this down, writing it down is kind of cheating. Just keep them in your memory. The 3 numbers that I just told you, can you say them in reverse? So reverse the order of those 3 numbers I just gave you. So if you were able to say 2, 4, 7, then your phonological memory is probably in pretty good shape. If you were able to remember those 3 digits, 7, 4, 2, hold that in your short-term memory, reverse them, 2, 4, 7, that's phonological memory, okay, without writing any of it down, because that pulls from your visual processing, and that's kind of cheating. So we just want to test our phonological memory right now. Let's do another quick test for phonological memory. I'm going to say a word. It's a nonsense word. It's not a word you're going to be familiar with. And I'm going to say it for you, and I want you to listen carefully, and I'll tell you what I want you to do with that word in just a second. So your word is chasey doolid. Chasey doolid. Okay, now I want you to repeat that word that you just heard me say. Did you say chasey doolid? Chasey doolid. It's a made-up word, obviously, so a nonsense word, so you couldn't have had any prior knowledge of that word. If you're able to listen to that word, keep it in your short-term memory, and then repeat it accurately, again, that's a part of your phonological memory. So hopefully you found out today that your phonological memory is in good shape. But what happens when your phonological awareness and your phonological memory are not in good shape? Well, that breeds a whole lot of problems for our kiddos. Kiddos who have a problem in either one or both of these areas, sometimes kiddos are affected in both of those areas. Sometimes it's just one or the other. But when that happens, the result is difficulty mastering the early reading skills, the decoding, the putting the letter and the words, the letter and its sound together, difficulty learning new vocabulary words, and also difficulty in following multi-step directions. So when we have our kiddos who are struggling readers, it's a phonological awareness and or phonological memory problem. And you're going to find usually these kiddos are going to have not only difficulty learning how to read and decode in English, but problems learning new vocabulary, and following multi-step directions. So it results in poor decoding of words. So their word attack skills are hampered by those phonological problems. Poor fluency almost always means poor comprehension. You have to have good fluency, reading fluency, to achieve good comprehension of the material. Because if your short-term memory is taken up, you only have so much space in there. And if it's taken up trying to break down the word, decode it, you're not going to have enough room to put the word together, to understand the meaning, to understand the sentence, the paragraph. It just all breaks down at that level. So poor phonological awareness, poor phonological memory equals a struggling reader. And unfortunately, sometimes these kiddos get to upper grades and they're still struggling with the phonological awareness and or phonological memory. It's a foundational skill. You don't get to skip past it. It has to be working and intact if you're going to be able to read and decode, build reading fluency, have good comprehension. Okay, so what do we do to address the phonological awareness issues with our kiddos? Because like I said earlier, every classroom we know we have at least one, if not multiple kiddos who are struggling to read at grade level. What the research has shown, and research now has been around well over 30, 40 years, with the kind of technology that's been introduced since the 1990s with MRI technology. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But what we know is that the best way to support our kiddos who are struggling readers, the best way to support all our kiddos, whether they are struggling to read or they're reading at grade level, are what we call multi-sensory strategies. If you're like me and you spend a lot of time in the dyslexia world, and trained on different interventions to work with our struggling readers, you'll notice that all of these programs that we use for those kiddos, and they're all research-backed, everything from Take Flight, Wilson Language, Nyhouse, Orton Gillingham, you name it, they all have, the basic components are the same. What the Dyslexia Handbook tells us that these programs have to be in compliance with Texas education laws are multisensory strategies. Because we know that when kiddos are able to learn using those different modalities, their eyes, so seeing, hearing, touching, using their hands and motions of their arms, of their bodies, that when you're using multiple senses, the learning, the memory kicks in, and it makes reading easier for the student. So the multisensory strategies is the best bang for our buck, the best use of our time in the classroom to help all readers, but especially our struggling readers. So when I referred to the research and the MRI technology, you guys probably are familiar with MRIs if you've ever been to the hospital and had any kind of, it doesn't even have to be a head injury. You may have had an MRI, but that technology, which really came about in the 1990s, where they started to use it to learn more about what our brains are doing when we're reading. It provided some really interesting information. So some of the research that has come out of that is about multisensory learning. And what we found out is that the benefit of multisensory learning has been verified by research in cognitive science since the 1990s. There's a 2018 study that used the MRI technology, which measures brain activity by detecting changes in the blood flow. And it found that our kiddos with the strongest literacy skills, our strongest readers, had more interactivity between different regions in their brains. So they could see that with the MRI, that the best readers were using multiple different parts of their brains together to read and understand the information. And so from that information, we can determine that reading is a whole brain skill. It's not isolated to just one or two areas. It really is using different parts of the brain together, working together. And multisensory instruction would capitalize on that, and is those strategies that hit all the different senses, your hearing, your vision, your tactile, kinesthetic, sense of touch. That is the best way to approach that teaching, because it's the best way to enhance memory and help kiddos to learn and understand as much as possible. One other thing I do want to mention, if you've never seen the research by Howard Gardner, been around for a long time now, and I know probably a lot of you are familiar with it, but I just want to remind everybody about the multiple intelligences research and the theory that Howard Gardner proposed. And he really determined that the traditional ideas about learning and intelligence were very narrow. IQ tests, I've given many of them. And they pick up on certain things, but definitely not everything. It's kind of a joke among diagnosticians that an IQ test is a great way to measure how well you do on IQ tests. And that's kind of a little bit of a narrow view of IQ tests, but really there's truth in that. Gardner, back to Gardner, he believed that we have proficiencies in several different areas, as many as 8. I think they've increased it since then. But basically he started out with 8 different areas of intelligence. And so hitting multi modes of learning is the best bang for our buck as teachers. And it's going to help our kiddos to learn and retain that information more readily. So that's I just threw a whole lot of verbiage at y'all. And so I just want to take a second, and I'm going to kind of log off my screen share for just a second so I can look at the chat. And any questions, just want to pause for a little bit here and make sure that everything's okay technology-wise. And if any questions, again, there will be time at the end of the presentation if there's something else you think of, or if I don't see it in the chat. Okay, all right, keep rolling. So make sure we don't take too long. No chat messages at the moment. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Let me go back to sharing my screen so you can see okay. So hopefully now you can see the big screen. Oh, that's better. Okay, so let's think about some of those multisensory strategies. What are some things you can do in your classroom to help the kiddos get that information into their long-term memory, help them free up that short-term memory, allow more information to go into your long-term memory? Because we all know as teachers, that's the whole goal, right? Is getting your kids to remember something. You know, sometimes you teach something on Monday and you think, oh, wow, they've all got it. They're doing great. And then Tuesday rolls around and it's like it never happened. And it's like, oh, my goodness, what happened? I know we went over this for 20 minutes yesterday. And that means it didn't really make it into long-term memory, right? And it's essential for being able to be a good reader, read with fluency, read with prosody, and ultimately comprehend and understand the material. We've got to have that memory working. And this is a big challenge for us and for our struggling readers in lots of ways. So let's think about some strategies that are multisensory that you can do to help your kiddos in the classroom. One thing that you can do to incorporate it into your instruction is what we call touch and name. And especially with any kind of alphabet activities, or if your kiddos are reading out loud, this is a very multi-sensory strategy to help your kiddos learn that information better, to get it to move into long-term memory. So especially if you're working with younger kiddos, and even kiddos in 4th and 5th grade. I have 4th graders that 1 year was very eye-opening. I've shared this with other groups I've taught, but it made such an impact on me as a teacher. I have 4th graders. It was the beginning of the year, and our 4th grade team decided we were going to do all our beginning of year testing, which usually was a running record for reading, and a short few questions to measure comprehension. And that year we said, we really need to take a look and, see if they have their alphabet skills, because we were actually looking more towards focusing on dictionary skills because we know our kids needed help with that. And so we decided to, before we started doing our running record, was just to have our kiddos say the alphabet. So just to run down the, A to Z. And boy, was that the most eye-opening thing I think I've ever done as a teacher. Is here they were 4th graders. And I would say, okay, go ahead and say your alphabet for me. Well, first of all, the first thing they'll do is they'll try to sing it, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, well, that's a different part of your brain that it's pulling from. So that's okay. But I want to hear you say each letter and say it clearly. And there were quite a few of my 4th graders who they could get so far and then it all fell apart. And that was super eye-opening. They do need to know the names of the letters. They absolutely do. And they need to know it with automaticity, which means immediate recall. Has to be fast. Otherwise, they can't build reading fluency. So that can be a big problem. So if that's something that you're facing with your students as well, and or you're working with the little guys, those daily practice with alphabet, or if they're just reading something out loud to you, have them touch and name. So take your finger, put it on the letter, and out loud, orally, say the name of the letter. And as you go down the row, do the rest for the other 25 letters. Or if they're reading something out loud to you, put their finger on the word, say it out loud, touch and name. This is a multisensory strategy. You're doing something orally, so it's auditory, it can be heard, so they're saying it out loud. You're doing something visual, they're touching or pointing at the letter or the word, and it's tactile. So they're using their finger to point at the word or the letter. So it's multisensory. So touch and name anytime you're practicing with your alphabet, which I highly recommend doing every day. Just takes a few minutes, less than 5 minutes normally. Or if they're a little bit older and they're reading, have them read out loud every day, every opportunity you can, and have them use the touch and name strategy. It's very multisensory. It'll really help your kiddos. Younger kiddos can do this, but even if you feel like your kiddos are a little older and they would benefit from it, tactile letters. This helps not just with reading and recognizing the letters, the shape of them, but it definitely helps with writing. They have to know the shape of those letters if they're ever going to write a word, a sentence, a paragraph. When you can do something tactile, also combine it with touch and name. So sand or bumpy letters or whatever it is, something with texture. Have them trace the shape of the letters multiple times. Trace the shape and repeat the name of the letter and do it over and over. Give them lots of practice. That way the shape of the letter, the name of the letter gets into their memory and they have an easier time recalling it. It'll help build reading fluency. For our kiddos who are younger, rhyming books and songs are great ways to build phonological awareness. There's plenty of them out there. There's lots of choices for fun books that build in rhyming, and just practicing rhyme. If the kiddos are a little bit older, you can start with alliteration in poetry. Those are great ways to build that phonological awareness. Listening for sounds, recognizing when sounds sound the same or are similar. So songs and rhyme and poetry, alliteration are great ways to build that phonological awareness. Something else I wanted to share with y'all is what I learned years ago working in Austin, and I just loved it. It's called TPR, Total Physical Response. So teaching strategy. You can find out more information. There's the website teachhub.com. And this is a way of teaching vocabulary and using physical movements in the process. You can also make it very visual too by linking a picture with the new vocabulary word. So your kiddos are reading a new text, you have 3 or 4 or 5 words. Don't introduce too many, keep it to 3 to 5 words max. You're introducing these new words, you want them to learn this new vocabulary. A great way to teach that is to introduce a motion, something kinesthetic with that new word, also a picture to go along with it. So if I'm teaching a new word, maybe my word is knit, K-N-I-T, like you had to knit something together. So I might show my kids a picture, and we might come up with, or I can do it beforehand as the teacher, whatever works for you, a motion, like the motion of knitting something together, moving your hands. And every time you talk about that word, the kiddos can do that same motion, and it links that to memory more closely than if you just say knit means to use knitting needles and string something together. The TPR, Total Physical Response, for vocabulary learning, great way to make your instruction more multisensory. I just love it, and I really feel like it works. I've used it a lot, and the kiddos remember the words. They really do. Audiobooks, there's lots of the technology we have now, and with the iPad and what's available to our kids, there's lots of different things out there. But try to incorporate audio. Your struggling readers, all of your readers, will benefit from hearing the text read out loud to them. If your goal is comprehension and you know they're struggling readers, yes, you want them to read, but the audio learning isn't taking away from that. It's helping them to process that information. So, and the last one on the list here, Learning Ally, that website, that tool should be free. I don't think they've changed anything on this, to all your kiddos who have been identified with learning disability. So 504 or SPED kiddos. So if they don't have access to Learning Ally, ask your SPED folks or go to learningally.com and check it out. That should be available to them. There's other things to use. Spotify, Storynory is pretty cool. So just keep that in mind. Audiobooks, there's lots of good libraries out there now. Fonts and spacing is another great way to, it's something to be aware of when you're working with your kiddos. Fonts, I know sometimes as teachers, we see things and they're very cutesy, and we love cutesy. I do too, I'm the same way. But keep in mind for struggling readers, that visual can be problematic. If the text is not easy to visually process, there's a font, a typeface called Dyslexie, and you can, if you just Google it, it's pretty clear and easy to read. There's some research that does show that it does make it easier for our struggling readers to use that kind of font, Dyslexie. But even if it's Tahoma, or I used Calibri a lot, Arial, they're bigger are usually, you can always make the font size bigger as well, but the way they're laid out tends to be a little bit easier to see visually. So keep in mind the font, the spacing. If you have a lot of text on a page, I highly recommend breaking that up, because if it's too much, it can be overwhelming for the kiddos. But if you space it out, it's just even psychologically just easier on the students. So consider the font and spacing. There are a lot of visualization techniques are great ways to enhance memory. And there's lots of little quick reminders and things, and you can teach the kids to help improve their memory using visualization. Images are easier to remember than facts. Is something that you see in your mind's eye. Creating images, it actually forces you to focus on it. And so using a visualization technique when they're learning something. So tell the kiddos, close your eyes. I want you to picture it in your mind, or providing them with a picture of something if they, especially if it's something more abstract that they may not be that very familiar with. The memory book, been around forever, since even before I was in college, has a lot of those neat little visualization strategies. So if you've never seen it, you can probably find it, used copy for a few dollars. So consider it. It has a lot of neat stuff, really interesting. Visualization techniques are very great ways to help the memory. Visualize what you're reading, picture the word, picture the letter in your mind. Take a few seconds, tell your kids to do that, close their eyes. It will help them to remember it later on. Chunking and repeating information. Chunk things into small, manageable pieces. Don't expect them to remember a long string of words. Break it up into small pieces, kind of like we do with phone numbers. We break them into small chunks so that we remember them. It's easier when it's in a smaller chunk. And repeat. Repeat it in a different way, or change the way it looks visually, and it'll often help the memory, to build a memory around that concept. So chunking information and repeating, giving multiple chances to repeat, say it out loud, is a great memory strategy. So 3 ways to also build fluency. 3 of probably the most important strategies you can incorporate: modeling modeling fluent reading, reading with prosody, reading with good expression and fluency. Read for your kids. Even the upper grade kiddos will benefit from hearing a fluent reader. Reads things to them. Read it multiple times. Modeling that in your classroom every day, so for your students to hear, is a great strategy for building fluency. Repeated readings. There's a great book by Shanahan and Lonergan about the early childhood book, I should say. And they talk about repeated readings. And that means if you're reading a certain text, it's not a one and done. Go back and reread. Break it down into parts. Read it out loud again. Read it on Monday and go back and reread it on Tuesday. Have the kiddos read it with one partner. The next day, have them read it to another partner. Repeated readings builds vocabulary, builds fluency and comprehension. So when you're working with a text, visit that text multiple times and have your kiddos read it to themselves, read it out loud, listen to you read it, listen to an audio tape of it or an audio recording. It's the great strategy for building fluency. Again, the audiobooks, and this is just some of the research I wanted to point out. There was a study done in 2010 with dyslexic kiddos who listened to audiobooks, and they came away with the observation that these kiddos really did not only gain in their reading accuracy, but it improved their behavior and their school their school performance, their motivation, because they felt the audio really helped support their reading and helped them, I think, well, according to the research, feel more successful, made a more positive experience for them. So lots of good research out there to show that audiobooks really can help your kiddos learn how to enjoy reading and become more fluent readers. Last thing I do want to say about the data, because I know you hear this all the time about taking data and take more data and then take some more just in case. Just make sure whatever data you're taking, it's apples to apples. You want to make sure that the assessment tool you're using is a good one for what information you need to have. How often do you need to give that? You may be going overboard with it. So really think about, do we need data every 2 or 3 days, or is it, every 2 or 3 times a month will give us the information and work just as successfully? Don't spend all your time taking data and not enough time teaching. Create a balance there. Fluency probes, I would recommend that you do on a regular schedule with your kiddos. And then the most important thing at all is what we fail to do a lot of times, and myself included, is now that you have all this data, sit down and take a look and don't rush through it. Take time to look through it and really examine, what is this data telling me about my kiddos? What do I need to, what's working? What's not working? What do I need to revise here? What other things can I do for my kiddos based on this data? So set aside the time to review the data and make sure that you are looking at what your kiddos are successful with, what they're struggling with, and then go from there. Revise your plan from there. I think that's one of the biggest things I see, and I'm guilty of myself, is taking the data and just kind of glancing at it and moving on. And that's not the purpose. The purpose is to help drive instruction. So I wanted to share that with you, but I believe we have this last bit of our time is for any questions. And I'm actually going to toggle back to so I can see my chat a little bit better here. Hold on. Okay. I will be happy to, if you have any questions you'd like to put in the chat, feel free to do so. And I will be here with you until our session is up, which isn't we've got a good amount of time. Yeah, we got about 12 minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Feel free to put them in the chat if you'd like, and I will do my best to respond. Again, my email address is smccown. Actually, I can put it in the chat for everybody. I'm going to write it again here. And if you want to email me, there it is. If you would like to email me, and I can add you to my contact list if you'd like. If you don't want to be added, that's fine. If you'd just like a copy of the slides from the presentation, just say, hey, can you send me the interventions for struggling readers? And I would be glad to send that on to you. And for those of you who are going on to the next session, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And hopefully you gained a little bit from our session this morning, and enjoy the rest of the conference. If you don't see me later, I hope you enjoy it. We put a lot of hard work in. The ladies here at Region 6 and our helpers at Event Moby, and we really appreciate all of the hard work they've put in. And thanks so much for your time.